You will be betrayed worse than Judas betraying Jesus betrayed. It's like they will sit at your dinner table, and the entire time when you're getting the food from the stove, they're sticking a dagger in your back. Betrayal. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Destiny Thomas, also known as the Therapist, and I am coming from behind the scenes and sharing the 100 things they do not tell you that comes with giving God your yes. If you watched the previous video, we went over number 1, which is you will feel absolutely crazy at some point in this journey. So if you haven't watched that one, go back and watch it. I'll also make sure I post it at the top where you can go right back to it after you're done watching this one. But today we're going to be talking about number 2, betrayal. Now listen, y'all. I've read the Bible, right? We've all heard the story of Judas. We all have not heard. We've all read the story of how Judas betrayed Jesus. There's several stories in the Bible where people might have lied to, get their way in certain situations or things like that. But I don't think I have ever heard a story about how bad you're betrayed in leadership. Like where someone just came from behind the veil and told the full unadulterated truth. And I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but you're not going to get that here from me either. And just to be honest, I'm going to tell parts of my story. I'm going to tell parts of different ways that I've been betrayed on this journey in leadership with Christ, which is hitting on 7 years. But if you're doing it the right way, God is only going to allow you to disclose but so much. And the reason why that is because he wants your hands and your heart to stay clean in a way so that when he does begin to work on their heart, if they choose to come back and ask for forgiveness, you haven't created a environment that doesn't make that possible, right? If you tell too much of the story, if you, indulge too much, offense can come in to where you're getting in the way of their salvation ultimately in some way, shape, or form. I hope that makes sense. And so I'm going to share how betrayal looks in leadership, or how betrayal looks in just giving God your yes. And I think this one is going to be a little bit longer than any of the other ones I touch on, because I do want to put less emphasis on the betrayal that happens and put more emphasis on how God instructs us to maneuver through the betrayal. Because I think in the kingdom, we miss that so much. We allow the world to tell us how to handle betrayal or how to handle relationships that at some point we may have said God ordained, right? And if God ordained it, that means it's being attacked by the enemy, which means there needs to be some strategy and some instruction and direction that's coming right from heaven of how to maneuver that. And let me just be the first one to say that it never ever looks anything like you are instructed to handle worldly relationships or relationships that, let's just say, are not ordained by God, right? And so let me just go over some of the ways that you could be betrayed in leadership while on your journey. And I don't even want to put so much emphasis on leadership. My betrayal really came once I was a leader, less in me giving God my yes. But I believe that when you give God your yes, you're going to receive or be betrayed in some capacity, right? I also would like to say before I get into that I do think the way the betrayal affects you has a lot to do with spiritual maturity, right? Because now, fast forward some years, I look at how if I was a little bit mature in my walk with Christ, if I was a little bit more confident in my ability to hear the voice of God and the discernment that God has given me, I would have not been impacted at the level that I was impacted at, right? So let's just go into some ways that you can be betrayed. And I'm probably going to go to the smallest way to the largest way, right? So some ways you're betrayed in giving God your yes is just the simple things in regards to you constantly are praying for others, or, being there for others and giving things to others, and, feeling like they're not acknowledging you, right? Or feeling like, they may be saying one thing to you, but saying something to another person, right? Those are very, I don't want to say minor betrayals, but those are minor things that kind of come with just giving God your yes. Because you have to understand the entire time, they're not even coming against you, they're coming against God, right? And then there's a lot of different ways of betrayal that come, like, as long as you're telling them what they want to hear, they're on your side. But the minute you have to have uncomfortable conversations or hard conversations, or tell them, thus saith the Lord, and it's calling out something that they're doing in privacy or secrecy that God wants to bring to light, that is where betrayal kind of comes in. They'll kind of create these little mini groups of people that have like spirits, right? They're all maybe, liars. They all may be those who may be participating in sex before marriage, right? And that's something God told you to call out in them. So they kind of find people who the spirit is looking for a like spirit. Some people call it I don't remember the word, spiritual bonding, spiritual bonding. But so that's another way of betrayal, right? You're kind of like, God, I can only speak for me. I was like, God, how is it that people are upset with me about something I'm telling them that you told me to tell them? Like, I could care less what grown people do, right? I'm a grown person myself that's trying to live the straight and narrow life. Like, I wouldn't want to know your business, right? So if I'm telling you, if I'm reaching out to you and letting you know something that the Lord is instructing me to tell you, take it up with God, right? So that's a couple ways of betrayal that'll happen specifically in leadership, right? God will instruct you to tell people things. Like, guys, I had a situation a couple of times, right, where I was literally minding my business. I always say this to like my clients and like my friends, like, I was like minding my business, like, sitting here eating sushi, minding my business, and out of nowhere, the Lord's like, hey, I need you to call this person and tell them this. I'm like, why? Like, they're grown, they hear from you. Why do you need me to tell them that, right? And I always tell like the people I work with, if I call you and say, hey, God's telling me to ask you about this, 99.9% of the time, it's really 100. He's already said it to you probably more than once, right? And so I call the person and I'm like, hey, how you doing? And they're like, what God tell you to call me and say? And I'm like, the fact that you know that I'm calling because of this, like, why are we in this uncomfortable position? Right? And so I informed them of what it was that the Lord instructed me to tell them. And come to find out, it became this big thing where I was trying to tell them they didn't hear from the Lord and all these things. And I'm like, God, but I was minding my business. I did not even know about what they were doing. What? Right? So that's some ways of betrayal that will happen in regards to, like, you're just truly trying to obey God, but it seems like, your obedience to God will irritate people or the spirit that is operating in them sometimes. And then, of course, the most painful betrayal is the betrayal that's very similar to Judas. And that's when you've befriended someone or have allowed somebody into your intimate space, and they end up not being who they who they panned out to be, right? They end up turning on you or making you out to be something that you're not, right? And so those ones are usually the most painful. I've been doing this, like I said, for about 7 years. And I've probably had that happen to me a solid 3 times. One major time and then a couple minor times. But the minor ones, I can say, glory be to God, that there's been restoration there. We've been able to get together and have conversations. And we're both back in a place where we both love each other. I've never stopped loving, but you know what I mean? Like, where we are both amicable and we're just back in a good place. So it can happen. Restoration can happen. And that's why it's so important to do it God's way, because even in those minor situations, there was information that was being brought to me in regards to, things that the people were saying about me. And I was like, God, like, I feel like you're not fighting for me. Like, I feel like you're making me lay down and be quiet when I didn't do anything wrong, right? But the Lord knew that if I then told my side of the story or reacted, then when that time came and me and the young lady or young ladies had those conversations, we maybe have never gotten back to that point, right? But one thing that she said is, she was like, Destiny, I respect you so much because the way you handled me, even after that happened, you still loved me. You still told me happy birthday. You still, reached out to check how I was doing. Like, I appreciate you for your consistent love, even when I didn't do you right? And so that's why it's so important to do it with God. And so that's, like I said, I want to focus more on when the betrayal happens, right? Because it is painful, especially if these are people that you've befriended or you've brought into your intimate space. I'm very, very, very particular about who I allow in my home, who I allow around my children, who I allow around my, my mother, my husband. And so when those people come into your intimate space and then you find out that their intention or their motive the entire time was not a good one, it's very painful. It's very, very painful. But what I can say I learned from that, because in anything that you go through with the Holy Spirit and with God, there's always a lesson in it. There's always an opportunity to mature in how God operates with his children, right? And so what I learned in those different situations and scenarios is, number one, be very clear who the person is before you allow them in your intimate space, right? And so in the situation that happened some years ago, I needed to heal at a deeper level, right? And what do I mean by that? I didn't get along with women growing up. I got along with them, but they didn't like me, right? And so I finally began to make friends in my community and in my women's retreats that I host. And so I felt obligated to let my guard down with these people because we're in such intimate spaces. And I never went to God to identify clear boundaries, right? I never went to God and said, God, are these just clients? Are these just retreat attendees, or are these my friends, right? Especially because the type of work I do, people are very intimate with me. They tell me some of their most deepest, darkest secrets, right? And so I felt like I owed it to them to be their friend. And so that was the biggest thing I learned, being very clear to go to God and ask God, who is this person to me, right? And what are they to me? Are they seasonal? Are they permanent? Right? Because God will give you that insight if you are intentional about asking him those questions. Number two, never question your discernment. Never. Okay. From a little girl, I used to can go into a room, I used to come meet people, and immediately my body would respond. And growing up, I didn't really understand what that meant at all times. But as I've matured in my relationship with God, I know certain things are true regardless of the situation and circumstances changing, right? Example. So me, if I meet someone and immediately a certain part of my head starts to hurt, I know that their spirit is clashing with mine. It sounds crazy. It sounds weird, but I promise you it's truth, because year after year after year, it has rang true, right? And so I have realized when I meet certain people, if that happens to my body or my eye starts to twitch a little bit, it doesn't mean necessarily like cut them off and be like, oh, I'm not going to talk to you, but it immediately lets me know to be observant, right? To be observant, to be very cautious in regards to what I say, how I respond, what I share, right? And I know that some of you may watch this video and be like, oh, she's just being hypersensitive. No. That's why a lot of us end up betrayed and hurt